Before I start my talk today, I want to give you a quick heads up about what you're about to see. This presentation contains AI-generated images of real and imaginary figures from history, some of victims, for instance, of the Holocaust, some of perpetrators, and some of the scenes that never happened and never could have. And I'm showing them not to endorse them, of course, but because I think they're worth looking at carefully and critically. And I believe they can tell us something interesting and important about how these systems that generate them work and what they're doing to our relationship with the past. That being said, I'm going to start my presentation, which I titled Unreal Ancestors, Reimagining History Through AI. What I want to talk to you about today is, as I was saying, what I'm calling Unreal Ancestors, which are AI-generated images and videos of historical people and events. Real means something is grounded in evidence, something actually happened or actually existed. And a lot of the images you see here and you will see throughout this presentation look real at first glance. On this slide, for instance, you see 4 figures. You see Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa Lakota chief and resistance leader, Clara Zetkin, German socialist, politician and feminist, Adolf Hitler, chancellor and dictator of Nazi Germany, and Martin Luther King Jr., American Baptist minister and civil rights activist. They are recognizable, they carry enormous historical weight, but none of these images are historical records. Every one of them was produced through a simple text prompt of just their name, nothing else. Historically, to prompt meant to summon something forth, to bring it into being, especially in a theatrical context, and that is still kind of what is happening today. The past, people and scenarios from the past are being summoned on demand. My background is in history. I studied it. I worked in historical museums, and I have spent years working with photographs as sources for research, for exhibitions, for online communication and education, and thinking carefully about what they do and don't show. And what fascinates me now is kind of the moment when the image stops being evidence and starts being generated, or at times also remixed from a real photographic image or painting. So mainly what you're going to see today are images that have been created from text to image prompts, but you can also generate images from image to image prompts or image to video prompts. There's several ways you can do it. I would say that this remix or new generation is a significant threshold, and we're only beginning to understand what crossing it means. Let me give you 3 examples of how these images circulate in the wild. On Facebook, users encountered an image of a man named Henrik, described as a violinist said to have played Schubert at the Auschwitz concentration camp. And the image was widely shared and perceived as real. In fact, it was AI generated. On Instagram, a fan account of Sylvia Plath posts and criticized an AI-generated portrait of the author that she found on Pinterest, and it was modeled on a real photographer. And on the original post, it didn't have any disclaimer on the pinboard. And on Facebook, Adolf Hitler appears with a flower crown and lipstick repurposed to make a contemporary political point.
I need to tell you something. You need to leave. Like, right now. Leave? But I'm the Queen of England. That man is going to... Just be careful. Okay, so they just put all of this in front of me and walked away.
My lady, you cannot eat before the tasting confirms.
Okay, that was actually incredible. What is that?
That is the king's personal peacock.
The king's peacock.
What sorcery is this? These women, they present themselves for selection?
Kinda. So you just swipe right if you like them?
I like this one, and this one, and...
Okay, you can only pick one.
I have never only picked one.
He has been on it for 40 minutes. I don't know how to get the phone back.
This one has written she enjoys long walks and falconry. She sounds agreeable. How do I send word?
You just type something. He literally just opened with, I am the King of England.
So I hope you could all hear the audio of these videos. And as you can see, it's not only still images. On Instagram, the mummy of Queen Tia is resurrected. And among other videos on this channel, where human remains are revived or Roman emperors are brought to life from statues. And the last video you saw is a TikTok time-traveling influencer named Chloe, who visits Henry VIII and tries to warn Anne Boleyn of her fate. And in other videos on the channel, she investigates the dancing plague of 1518 or hops on board the Titanic. I think it's genuinely interesting that thousands of people watch those videos, and they clearly want to feel close to history or have an appetite for this sort of content. And I think the big question here is it just an evolution of books, of theater plays and movies, or is it something more? The manipulation of historical images is definitely nothing new. Photographs have been altered for vanity, for political purposes, for commercial gain, almost since the medium was invented. And one well-known example is the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, where his head is grafted onto the body of John C. Calhoun, a pro-slavery politician. And in the Soviet context, Joseph Stalin had political opponents, for instance, Trotsky, systematically removed from photographs, quite literally rewriting the visual record. And there are also cases of misattribution or early deepfakes. An image once circulated as a photograph of an infant Adolf Hitler turned out to be an altered stock image of an unrelated American child. And at the same time, manipulation has also been used critically. In a well-known photo montage by John Hertfield, Joseph Goebbels is shown attaching a beard to Hitler's face, and the image satires Hitler's attempts to appeal to working-class voters by mimicking socialist rhetoric. And to us, the construction here in this image on the magazine cover is very obvious. The cutouts are visible, the proportions are off. To readers at the time, at first glance, there might have not been immediately. What these examples show is that the impulse to visibly or invisibly construct and manipulate images of the past is nothing new. It is tied to the history of the medium itself and to the exercise of power, most importantly. Many of these generated images don't just look real, they also look familiar. And that familiarity is often built on myth rather than historical fact. Illustrations of Marie Antoinette often appear with cake or with the sentence, "Let them eat cake," but there's no evidence she ever said that, or brioche, as the French versions state. And the quote appeared in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's book Confessions, written around 1765, when Marie Antoinette was a child in Austria and had not yet married into the French court. And he also referred to an unnamed princess there, not to her. The quote became a popular myth to symbolize the disconnection of the French monarchy and is now intertwined with today's pop culture reception of Marie Antoinette in movies and on posters and cards like the one that I'm showing a cutout here. Vikings likewise are routinely shown with horned helmets, though there's no historical evidence. They wore them in battle. The image largely originates in 19th century romantic art, and stage design, especially in productions of Richard Wagner's operas. He had horned and winged helmets in his operas to create a dramatic, mythic aesthetic that later again solidified in popular culture. And Neanderthals appear as stooped primitive male brutes, despite the fact that we now know they used sophisticated tools, buried their dead, and had cognitive capacities far closer to our own than this image suggests. And these are stable visual cliches, and the AI has absorbed them to an extent, as you are able to see here. Why, you might ask? Because it has learned from us. Roland Meyer has a useful concept here. He calls it platform realism. AI image synthesis produces what is most expected, not what is most accurate. These models were trained on billions of image text pairs scraped from the internet, and the internet has a record of human culture. It's full of stereotypes, anachronisms, and also received ideas. And when I ran my own tests, and you can see the results of this here, I prompted image generators with what Marie Antoinette is famous for or a Viking. I got quite a few cliches. And when I added the phrase historically accurate, the outputs shifted. Not perfectly, but definitely noticeable. And this suggests something important. The models contain competing visual patterns. The default tends toward the most common, not the most correct, and the cliché is the path of least resistance. And platform realism isn't a mirror of the past. It's a mirror of what we've already told ourselves the past looked like. Matthew Magnani and John Clendaniel studied AI-generated images and texts of Neanderthals, comparing them computationally with a large body of archaeological scholarship. Their finding was there's a low correspondence between AI outputs and current scientific knowledge. Instead, the generated material reflects outdated scholarships, especially their images resemble research from the late 1980s and early 1990s. And with the texts, which is not today's topic, but I think it's still interesting, it resembled scholarship even from the 1960s. So they also found that when the prompt included expert knowledge, things improved slightly, which is also my experience with my own experiments. But yeah, not by much. Another example I want to bring up is that it applies, of course, also far beyond Neanderthals. A study on cultural representation in generative AI found that when asked to depict colonial history in New Zealand, the model consistently generated scenes where the landscape appears empty before colonization, where the colonization process itself looks peaceful and orderly, and where Maori people appear as static, timeless ethnographic subjects, and not as agents with their own histories, politics, and any sort of resistance towards the colonizers. Violence, conflict, largely absent. And this connects to what researchers have identified through the cultural benchmark, a systematic test of whether large language models actually understand diverse cultural contexts. And the finding is models perform well on dominant, well-represented contexts and struggle significantly with regions and cultures that are less visible in training data. And this is structural. Maya points out that the filtering of training data, decisions about what counts as high quality or aesthetically valuable, has been made by a very narrow group of people, predominantly male, predominantly from the US and Europe, and their tastes are baked into the model. And their blind spots are, of course, too. And the past that AI imagines is not a neutral past. It is a past filtered through specific, often colonial, often Western, and often male eyes. In January 2026, a network of major German memorial sites, Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, the Wannsee Conference House, among others, issued a joint open letter. AI-generated images falsifying Holocaust history had proliferated across social media throughout 2025. I actually encountered quite a few of them earlier on in my research already in 2024. They were assembled from fragments of historical fact and emotional fiction and circulated by content farms exploiting this atrocity for advertising revenue, according to their statement. Institutions like the Auschwitz Memorial have been direct on social media as well. AI-generated portraits of victims, even when paired with real names and biographies, as you can see in the example here on the left, are not acts of remembrance. They are fabrications that risk misleading viewers and undermining the integrity of the historical record. And the concern isn't that these images are false, but that they are widely shared, often by well-meaning people, and they blur the line between documentation and invention in a way that's genuinely hard to recover from. Let me give you one more example, which shows how these tools are being deployed in an explicitly ideological context.
From Freedom 250 and brought to you by PragerU, introducing the Freedom Truck, a mobile museum. Go back in time and experience the dawn of America with artifacts of the revolution, from the first settlements to the first cries of liberty.
Let it begin here!
From the shot heard round the world to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, from the battles of the Revolution to the establishment of the Constitution, from 13 colonies, from sea to shining sea. Experience America's 250th year like never before through an immersive journey that shows how patriots defied a king and forged a nation that changed the world. Now open. Brought to you by PragerU.
The Freedom Trucks that you just saw in the video here are touring AI-driven mobile museums, and they're designed primarily for school children, celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence. Their content was generated through a partnership between PragerU and Hillsdale College, a Christian university that helped draft Project 2025, that wants to consolidate executive power in favor of right-wing politics. Many of you are probably familiar with Project 2025. PragerU is also known for its America can do no wrong view of history, and according to PragerU, white people abolished slavery, and dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was a necessary thing that shortened the war and saved countless lives. And these views of the past are now being delivered to school children across the country with AI. To wrap up my talk today, I've shown you just some examples of how AI-generated images of historical figures circulate. The Holocaust victim who never existed, the portrait of Sylvia Plath, originally shared without a disclaimer, and Hitler with a flower crown. Some other images inherit and amplify existing myth. The cake Marie Antoinette likely never mentioned, the helmets Vikings never wore. And other images reflect structural bias. The Neanderthals frozen in the 1980s signs, the colonial history of New Zealand told without Maori resistance. And they can also be deployed deliberately in the touring mobile museums built to tell children a particular story about the American past. And in my own recent research, I've been generating images that you can see on the screen here, with various user-facing models to test where these systems draw their lines. Conspiracy images, straightforward portraits, impossible meetings. And what I find is that most systems will generate almost all of it. And if they refuse the generation, it feels rather arbitrary, and the rules they reference only apply some of the time. For instance, they say that an image of Anne Frank can't be generated because she's underage, but 3 times beforehand, it has generated the image without any problems. I'm also trying to reuse these images, not just for study purposes, but for educational purposes as well. A lot of energy, quite literally water, has been spent on generating these images, so I don't want them to go to waste. And I'm trying to reuse them in gamified learning experiences and within my practice-based research. And these images don't announce themselves as fabrications. They have the grain and confidence of documentation. Some still look a bit off, but many could be real, maybe slightly enhanced photographs from history. Especially on Gemini, when you prompt images, that's Google's image generation tool. Nano Banana is the model, and through Gemini you can generate it. You get historical, like actual historical photographs, which is quite bizarre. There are attempts underway to address some of this. The EU AI Act includes provisions requiring deployers of AI systems generating deepfakes to disclose that the content has been artificially generated or manipulated. And a code of practice is being drafted at the moment to specify what that looks like in practice. A standardized AI icon or placement requirements, accessibility obligations, etc. And the final version of this is expected sometime in the summer of 2026, which I think is actually rather late given the fast pace that the development of AI tools is going. I think it's worth asking honestly, will this help? On one level, yes, mandatory labeling is better than no labeling, but regulation addresses the label. It doesn't easily reach the model, the training data, the platform realism, or the structural bias. And much of what we've looked at today sits, I think, exactly in this gray zone. The legislation finds hardest to handle between art, satire, and entertainment, which will probably have its own rules according to the current draft, and of course, misinformation. And I think what's distinctive about AI image generation isn't that it's uniquely threatening. Humans have always manipulated images of the past, always constructed the ancestors they needed. Or they wanted. And what's distinctive is the combination. It's a democratized production on the one side and concentrated and opaque governance of specific, mostly American platforms on the other. And the decisions shaping what millions of people can and can't generate are distributed across model weights, system prompts, interface layers, and policy documents in ways that make accountability genuinely hard to locate. And that's a new situation, and it has real consequences for how history gets visually mediated at scale. And we're not the first people, or I'm not the first person to summon the past in ways that serve the present, but we may be the first to do it with tools available to anyone, shaped by decisions visible to almost no one. And I think understanding who governs that process and how seems like one of the more pressing questions that I'm trying to figure out with my research at the moment. Thank you very much. These are my references, and if you want to get in contact, you can find all of my contact data behind this QR code, my email, my website, etc. Thank you very much.